Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Today on The PA is In, we have a special guest, Jacqi Kernaghan. Jacqi is a bone health PA for the last 7 years, practicing for 17. And she's going to share with us how she took the leap from primary care to becoming the complete, nationally known expert on bone health and osteoporosis. We're going to learn a ton about treating osteoporosis, what you should know, when to refer, and how to keep yourself and your loved ones healthy and to avoid this disease process. Without further ado, here she is, Jacqi Kernaghan. Jacqi, thank you so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and why you are so passionate about it?
My name is Jacqi Kernaghan. I'm a PA outside of Philadelphia. I have been a PA for almost 17 years. I was in primary care for 7 years, and then almost the last 10 years, I've been exclusively treating bone health. My partner is a gynecologist. My supervising physician partner is a gynecologist by training. And he just sort of realized that there was a lot lacking in osteoporosis care in the early 2000s and just realized he could not be an OBGYN forever. That just lifestyle is not going to be appropriate for him as he continued to age. And he started doing osteoporosis 1 day a week in the clinic in the mid 2000s and then expanded his clinic the day we started in October of 2013. I was pretty content in primary care. I worked a lot. I did a lot of extra and I wasn't making great money, but I was happy. And I wasn't quite ready for a change, but a pharmaceutical rep actually connected me with my partner. And I actually had done a rotation with his partners at his practice for GYN. So I knew the practice really well. And then almost all of my family, my husband's family, all grew up going to him and working with him. So we had some other connections. And I said no quite a few times before he finally talked me into saying yes. I read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and that really helped me realize maybe I should take a jump into something new. And it was,
and it sounds like it's going well.
The absolute best jump I could have ever imagined. I absolutely love what I do. I love working with him. I love our practice. I love all of our patients. I was really fearful about leaving primary care in terms of the relationships I had. And I had patients that I had a physician partner there, retired, and left his entire panel of patients to me. Not to the other 5 physicians, but to me. And that I felt like I was letting him down by leaving, but sometimes you have to just do what you need to do. And that's what I've done. And I definitely still work too much. I attended your burnout lecture at PSPA in November, and that definitely made me think a little bit more. I'm setting up better boundaries and I'm taking time off because, as you said, nobody else will make you take it. And I feel really good about where we're at. We have a fracture liaison service. So we see patients at the time of their fracture in the hospital setting at our 4 hospitals, currently 2 because of COVID. But and then we also expanded from his 1 day a week of osteoporosis prior to me we went up to 7 office locations. And then we kind of backed off. He had COVID really severely. He was out of work for 5 months. So once he came back, when because of the emergency waivers in Pennsylvania, I could still work, fortunately, and still keep our practice afloat. But we scaled back at that point, realizing plenty of patients in Delaware County wouldn't mind driving a little further to see us. We could sort of consolidate. So that was really good. But it's just fantastic being the expert on a disease and knowing every single piece and every in and out and every treatment combination and every sequential direction for treatment. It's doing research now. It's just, I can't imagine my life any other place.
It's interesting because what you're describing is almost the exact opposite of primary care, right? In primary care, you know a lot about a lot, but you don't know everything about anything, right? It reaches a point where you say this person has to go and see this specialist. They have to go see someone else. So now you're on the receiving end of that. So I would love to hear more about what your day-to-day is actually like. Are you seeing patients preventing osteoporosis? You're seeing patients with it, managing that disease. What is your normal day? What kind of patients are you seeing?
Yes. So my schedule was built. I was the first and only employee of our cost center for a long time. So I did a lot of kind of administrative work that's changed and evolved over time. Unfortunately, of our 4 office staff members, 2 left in the last few weeks. So I'm back to doing more of the administrative work, which is frustrating. I know I'm not working to the highest level of my license, but being a small practice and staying afloat, through COVID, it's just what it is.
Sometimes you
So
just have to do that.
yeah,
Yep.
so I'm off today. It's a holiday, and I usually would be at work. And I specifically have looked at my schedule and said, I have these days off. I'm going to take the kids are off. My husband's a teacher. I'm taking it off with him. But I still wasn't prepared for tomorrow. So I spent 2 hours, this hour and a half this morning just getting my patients ready. And that's part of, we max at about 35 patients a day, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So let's look back up. So I see patients pretty much 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week are dedicated to the administrative work and like the hospital consults and follow-ups and follow-up on labs and DEXAs and things. But we see patients, primary prevention, so patients that have never fractured before, as well as secondary prevention, trying to prevent patients from fracturing again. I see patients with rare metabolic bone disease as well, and that is definitely my role in the practice. My physician has no interest in learning anything new in terms of other diseases. So that's an excitement that only I have, learning and getting these therapies approved. Really expensive, really detailed, complex therapies. But the day-to-day in clinic, it's just him and I, and then we do have a nurse full-time as well that administers all of our treatments in the office setting. So if your patient's on a therapy that they usually couldn't get it in the office, we have a nurse that can put IVs in and do injections right in the office, which is usually the most cost-effective way for some of those treatments to be given. We see pretty much 6 patients an hour. This sort of splits up depending on how long, but I do prepare at length before we see them. So when a patient walks in the room, it's not, oh, hi, Miss Smith, why are you here today? It's, oh, Miss Smith, I see here that your primary sent you to us and your gynecologist had sent you to us 3 years ago and you never came in. And I have every DEXA scan you've ever had done in the last 12 years. And I have every detail about every single thing on what treatments you were on. And they kind of sit there and just stare at me and I'm like, yeah, I stalked you a little bit last night. And they all, thank you so much for stalking me. They're so excited that we have all that detail. We knew early on that just having a DEXA scan in front of us from today's DEXA scan was never going to be an efficient way to see these patients thoroughly. So it's really detailed. But then lunchtime is usually going ahead and attempting to dictate everything that I did. Ideal world, we'd have a scribe, but we don't. So it takes me hours to do all of our write-ups for our visits. And then again, all the secondary labs we're ordering are very detailed. Sometimes patients will come back in to discuss those. Other ones, we do have a medical assistant that we just acquired in the fall that will have her help us with that. But being 2 people less in the office, she's got to help schedule patients and follow up and get things. So it's a difficult time in our practice, but I still want to go to work every day. And I still want to help the patients. And kind of ironic, I don't touch patients unless I'm hugging them. There's no physical exam for this disease state. It's based on their, really thorough history, including their fractures as well as their DEXA scans. And my one big caveat to this whole conversation is DEXA scans are not the be-all, end-all. I have someone that reached out to me that I'm mentoring in the middle of the state, and she said, well, this patient broke her wrist. I want to put her on this therapy, but her primary said her DEXA scan is too good that she doesn't have osteoporosis. There are more patients with low bone mass, or what we used to call osteopenia, that fracture bones than osteoporotic patients. The DEXA scan only shows us the bone density and does not show us the strength or the bone quality. So I can have a patient with a stone cold normal DEXA scan that still had a low velocity, low trauma fracture from standing height or less that suffered a fracture. That is a fragility fracture by definition. We cannot put all our eggs in the DEXA scan basket. We have to remember that DEXA scans are a secondary endpoint. A fracture in front of us, low velocity, not getting hit by a car, falling off a roof, that is an osteoporotic fracture. That is the definition of the disease, osteoporosis. And that is a hard thing for providers to acknowledge because they're so used to looking at
numbers,
something.
like reports.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to remind patients all the time that in this disease, numbers are not everything. And we have to look at the person in front of us that's not broken a bone to know that we're succeeding.
Yeah. And I think that having a practice like yours that specializes in this is where that really matters. I think it's an important reminder to someone who's doing that primary care, but also they're doing all the other things, which you know very well because you used to be doing all the other things. You're like, oh, your DEXA's fine, great. And you're going to keep moving on. And you are specifically saying that's one way to screen for one part of this disease process, but a normal DEXA scan plus a fracture still, you're still osteoporotic if you have a fragile. Okay.
Yeah, standing height or less. So in our hospital setting, we had a patient recently that was it was listed as an MVC, car accident in Chester, outside of in Delaware County, right off of 95. So we get a ton of traumatic injuries. But I asked the lady, I'm like, it says there's a low velocity collision. What happened? I was standing at the crosswalk, about to cross the street, started to walk, and a car was stopped and just barely bumped me and knocked me over and broke my hip. She was going less than a mile per hour. There was no speed involved at all. And I had to fight the traumatologist to give me the consult. They said it was an MVC. I said, it was not. It was a low velocity injury.
It was sort of, but not really. Yeah.
Yes, it was a car accident, but it would not have happened. She would not have broken her hip if she had not fallen to the ground. And every patient will tell you, oh, it was such a hard fall. It'll never happen again. And I have to remind them, I missed a step quite a few years ago holding my 18-month-old. And I slammed into the fieldstone at the bottom of the stairs and did not break a bone because I'm premenopausal at this time and still am currently. A couple more years, hopefully.
So let's talk about the disease process of osteoporosis. So this tailors well with your, OBGYN physician's background because of the way that it ties into hormones and stage of life. And, we don't see a ton of young people with osteoporosis unless they have some other rare metabolic disorder. So what is the process and why does it happen, particularly for people who are postmenopausal?
So I actually am in the midst of giving quite a few secondary osteoporosis lectures across the country for various PA organizations. I gave one at PSPA in November. I'm giving North Carolina one next week. Virginia, I'm going to do in the summer because there's quite a lot of secondary causes of bone loss. But if we talk just primary osteoporosis, estrogen related, generally speaking, estrogen is what prevents us from losing bone when we're younger. And I have patients regularly, I'm doing everything correctly. Why did I lose bone? It is, in many patients, just menopause. So inside of our bones, bringing it back to A&P and pathophysiology, we've got osteoclasts that remove bone and osteoblasts that build bone. Osteoclasts are the removers, osteoblasts builders. As we get older, because of our loss of estrogen in our average 52, sometime in that early to mid 50s for most patients, you suddenly have an influx of more osteoclasts. The osteoblasts can't keep up. The osteoclasts are removing too fast. Osteoblasts cannot keep up to build new bone, and that's where we're left with a deficit of bone. And I like to explain it in a little bit more of a simple imagery when I explain it to patients, because I have a picture of osteoclasts and osteoblasts premenopausally and then postmenopausally. And just the basics, that's it. But then if you consider secondary causes like diabetes, if you are not a diabetic and I am a diabetic and our T-scores are exactly the same, my risk as a diabetic is 4 times higher than your risk. And you can't relate that to anything. It's just what it is. But steroids, cancer treatments, especially chemotherapy and aromatase inhibitors and anti-testosterone drugs now. There's a lot of other things. But generally speaking, the patients I see are thin Caucasian women that are menopausal, that are healthy. Well, obviously, half of the other patients are all these other things, but it really truly is just that estrogen loss. Now, if you suffer with postmenopausal symptoms, vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, insomnia, yes, I will have that very detailed discussion about the pros and cons of estrogen. But when they're seeing me with osteoporosis, the pros outweigh the cons. So, and because my partner's a gynecologist, I'm very comfortable prescribing estrogen and progesterone if necessary for these patients. If you do not have those symptoms, then you don't need estrogen. So I have people that will come to me at 80 and say, can I go on estrogen? I said, no, you don't have any vasomotor symptoms anymore. The cons would outweigh the pros. But in our PA mom group recently, somebody asked about estrogen. I said, put her on the estrogen, because if she's young and menopausal and having those symptoms, why not improve their lifestyle, protect their bones, reduce their chance of colorectal cancer, all with just estrogen. But regularly, I'm telling patients, you didn't do anything wrong. This is just the status of life. We all live long enough. We're all going to get there.
That's how it works. So what can we do? The large majority of people listening to this podcast are premenopausal, practicing clinically PAs. A large majority of them are women or love someone who is a woman. What can that person, that listener, do to help decrease their risk? And also, what can they relate to their patients when they're doing a well visit or when they're seeing them? That how can we actively work to prevent against osteoporosis? Like, I can't not go through menopause, but is there things that I can do to help, mediate my risk factors?
Really important to not drink heavily when we're younger, and not smoke, especially in our adolescent and our 20s. That's the peak time to build bone. So I have patients, especially men, that were heavy drinkers, heavy smokers in their teens, 20s, and 30s, and then I'm seeing them with osteoporosis in their 50s. So limiting alcohol intake, and there was a study about 7 or 8 years ago that really showed that men can have up to 14 drinks per week, and women should limit it to less than 7 drinks per week. So that's what we recommend to patients. I'm not telling you a daily amount, but I'm just telling you in the week you should drink no more than 7 glasses of alcohol. Smoking, never. I mean, we know that for a lot of reasons, but especially for bone health. Those osteoclasts and osteoblasts get out of whack really fast with smoking and drinking. Calcium intake is the most important thing. My mother has always been amazing about getting calcium in her diet. She is menopausal now. She has been on steroids quite a bit. She has had an autoimmune disease, and her bones are still fantastic because of how much calcium she got when she was younger. So we recommend in the teenage years, it should be 1,500 milligrams. Goes down a little bit in our 20s. Premenopausal, really around 1,100 milligrams. And then 1,200 is what we recommend for anyone over the age of 50. The most by food, the better. Always better to get it by food. And the reason for that is there was some European studies and a few small U.S. studies showing that there could be a concern with cardiovascular issues with too much calcium supplementation. So getting it by food is always better. I have patients that, I had kidney stones. Okay, well, first of all, you need a secondary workup. Are you losing calcium through your kidneys? That could be a reason for bone loss. But why do a calcium pill that could increase kidney stone risk when you can do it dietarily? Vitamin D is really important. And there's a huge debate about what we should really be aiming for vitamin D in younger patients. I will disclose that I am 40 years old and I shoot for the same vitamin D level that I recommend for my patients, which is between 40 and 60 ng per ml. I need 5,000 units a day to stay there. My partner only needs 2,000 and he's turning 68 tomorrow. So it really just depends on every patient. You can't just go by what the lab reference value is, which is 30 to 100 is normal, when we know that in those 80s, 90s, 100s range, it's actually can influence the elderly with balance issues. So we shouldn't be shooting for higher. Weight-bearing exercise is really important all of our life. And not just, in the gym weightlifting, but weight-bearing, walking, jogging, running, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. Unfortunately, swimming is not going to be helpful for bones. Spinning, which my spin bike is right behind me, it's not helpful for bones because there's not that gravity on there. So there's definitely people that will debate that it still helps your strength. And if you have better muscles and you fall, there's less chance of breaking. But overall, I recommend that weight-bearing exercise to all patients. and recommending balance therapy or physical therapy if they're not really active. And that's a really important aspect besides just treatment options that exist.
I've never done this before, but I'm going to share something intimate, literally about my intimates on the podcast. After trying Vibrant Body Company's certified clean first layer bras and underwear, I threw everything else away. Life is too short to wear bras that don't fit. So schedule your virtual fit consultation with their master bra designer, Heidi. You get to Zoom, do live measurements, and find the exact right fit for you before ordering. Use the link in the show notes or the discount code Tracy15 for 15% off your Vibrant Body Company order. Make sure you try the thong and the semi-demi everywhere bra. You'll thank me later. So it's been a while since I've been in primary care, specifically never since I've actually practiced as a primary care PA. I did rotations in school. So can you tell me like an overview of what the treatments are? Like I'm assuming it's not just Fosamax, which is the one thing I would get correct on a multiple choice test if you asked me to treat a patient with osteoporosis. So tell us a little bit about some of those treatments.
If tomorrow you were to end up in primary care, I would beg you not to use Fosamax. So the half-life of Fosamax is somewhere between 5 and 10 years, whereas other oral bisphosphonates are in the weeks time frame. Fosamax is what we had first, alendronate. So it came out in 94, 95, and it is our gold standard. So everything is compared to that drug, but we have such safer options. And all of the pills are generic, although the last time I wrote an oral bisphosphonate was probably 8 years ago. So not something I do. The correct way to take an oral bisphosphonate is first thing in the morning on an empty stomach with 8 ounces of plain tap water. Cannot be bottled water, cannot be well water, cannot be coffee, cannot be sparkling water, plain tap water. And if you have a well, we recommend distilled water from the pharmacy. And then you can't eat, drink, or lay down for ideally 60 minutes. Even the patients that come to me having been on these things admit that they did not take it properly. Why would I give you something once a week or once a month? Or I have had a few patients that have come to me on daily Fosamax, still, many years later, when I can give you something once a year, once every other year, once every 6 months. These are all anti-resorptive options. So they're just interfering with the osteoclast functioning. A lot of times you'll come across issues where I don't have access to those things, but almost every area in the country has access to an infusion center. And whether that's in a hospital setting or an independent outpatient infusion center, there's always ones around. Hanging an IV, I do it all the time, is incredibly easy. It's a 20-minute infusion, and that's the intravenous annual bisphosphonate called zoledronic acid. Very well tolerated. And as soon as I tell patients about it, they say, why did somebody give me something once a week when I could do something once a year and be done with it? So that's one thing. A lot of times patients will not be able to tolerate the oral bisphosphonates, and then they're immediately put on to our twice-a-year injectable called denosumab, which is a rank ligand inhibitor. Twice-a-year injection sounds pretty easy. It's sub-Q. It's simple. The thing with that is once you start it, you cannot stop it. You cannot take a holiday from it because the way it works is it's stopping all the osteoclasts from existing in the bone. If we stop all the osteoclasts from existing and then you don't get your next shot, then all those osteoclasts come rushing back. They take away too much bone. And the PI specifically lists multiple vertebral fractures as an outcome. I have seen way more than just vertebral fractures. I have seen every type of fracture from patients being late on denosumab. It is a great medication. It's something that in our practice, we tend to hold until patients are older, or if they truly have failed intravenous bisphosphonate therapy. So my biggest pet peeve is to see a primary care provider put a patient on Fosamax. They have GI upset and they immediately put them on Prolia, where they're committed to it for the next 60 years of their life if they were put on therapy when they were young. It all comes down to what a patient's fracture risk is. If a patient's fracture risk is not high, even we're looking at their DEXA scan based on their age, they shouldn't be put on therapy. And I am frequently mentoring PAs and saying, I don't care if the patient's 52 years old and she's menopausal and she's osteoporotic, her risk of fracturing is so much less than somebody that's 62. Hold off because long-term issues do exist. We talk about the other side of bone treatment. We talk about anabolic therapies that are actually increasing the osteoblasts, so increasing the building cells. And these are really what are the best treatments we have, but they're still underutilized because we just don't know about them. I have some students right now from, I think you went to DeSales, right? I have students from DeSales right now, and yes, we talked about bisphosphonates, but the rest of these drugs are just, we need to learn more about them because building bone therapies are a deal. If we can, every research study shows if we can build bone first, the patients are going to have a better outcome going forward. And those, unfortunately, are self-injectables, daily injectables. As I remind patients, I'm committing you to this therapy for 2 years, not to your lifetime. So you can get through it in 2 years. My mother-in-law, love her dearly, not a great patient. She was leaning into a banister and broke her rib, and then came to me and said, okay, I'm ready for my DEXA scan. And I said, you don't need a DEXA scan now. You need osteoporosis treatment. And I put her on bone building therapy for 2 years as basically her baseline. She had been on Fosamax years and years ago, but she'll do better now because we built new bone instead of just making her bone thicker. The newest agent, which is 4 years old in 2 months, is kind of a combination of both. So it's stopping osteoclasts from removing bone and also building bone at the exact same time. And that's an injection you get in the office setting once a month for a year. And the biggest thing to remember is none of these are cures. These are treatments. So even if you go through the best treatment options we have, you're still going to have to continue on with something else next, or you'll just go back to where you were. And with COVID, we saw a lot of that where patients just refused to leave their homes. I mean, I was giving shots in the parking lot. So people that couldn't get into our office building, they could still get their treatment. But still, a lot of patients just didn't comply, and they're back to worse than where they were in 2020.
Yeah. Now, are you asking these patients to modify their lifestyle also, or are they able to do their normal activities as long as they're getting treatment and keeping up on things?
So we definitely, treatment is going to be the definitive treatment. I mean, the main thing we have to do is stop those osteoclasts or increase the osteoblasts. But you cannot change your bone density with exercise and diet alone. But exercise and diet are really, really important. I've had patients that stop their vitamins and now their vitamin D is too low and they're giving themselves a shot every day, but it's not working because their D level is so low. So it's not a replacement but we need to continue to take our calcium, vitamin D supplements if necessary, getting lots of calcium in our diet, continuing not to smoke, continuing not to drink much. Those are all imperative. The last thing I talk about with every patient is exercise. You must continue to weight bear with your exercise. We need you to continue to do that. And as I remind patients, the majority of fractures will only happen if you fall. That being said, vertebral fractures can still happen, rib fractures can still happen, pelvic fractures, insufficiency fractures can occur, but the majority of our fractures are not going to happen unless you fall, that low velocity, low trauma fall. So important to do everything else, but there's no way to improve your bone density and your bone quality without a true osteoporosis treatment.
Yeah, got it. So I want to circle back and talk about you making this decision to leave primary care and to go to this practice, which was a brand new entity, totally unknown. This is like a massive jump for you after 10 years in primary care. And it sounds like at first you were very resistant, like, no, I'm good. I'm fine over here. So talk to me more about that decision and sort of what went into that for you.
It very much was my physician partner. I mean, he is just the most energetic and fun person. And I met him I met him again at a rough time in his life with some family issues. And he was like, I can't do this without a PA. I need a PA to do this with. And I just think you're the right person. And I was already doing a lot of kind of administrative work for my primary care practice, upgrades to our electronic medical records. And that was at the time of meaningful use. So I was getting all our meaningful use stuff together and quality metrics. I was kind of leading I was the quality metric department, I guess, in my old primary care setting. After that, there was more of a team. But anyway, I realized, I've excelled at primary care. I love knowing a little bit about everything, but why not become the expert in something? Why not know every little piece just like this physician does? And it's really opened up my eyes to so much more in terms of even just looking at a specialist. And, I go to my GI PA. I just saw her recently, and Uh, to think that, yes, I know the bare minimum of GI stuff. I know when to turf over to GI at the time, but it's just so cool to be like on top of everything in a disease state. And I knew there wasn't a lot of bone health PAs or anyone doing a lot of bone health. I started a Facebook group for PAs and NPs called APPS in Bone Health on Facebook. And anyone that is a PA or NP is welcome to join that. It's just a nice, easy space to share and to ask questions and to not feel belittled by any other providers. I think we have a little more than 400 people in it. I don't do much in moderating it. I mean, it's just there for people to reach out. But with more and more quality metrics focusing on preventing secondary fractures, fracture liaison services are going to need to exist in every health system going forward. And I have a few people right now that their health systems have decided that their bone health clinic is not worth the money. And at some point, they're going to open their eyes and realize when Medicare starts holding money back, that they need to have those providers in place. A lot of bone health specialists exist within orthopedic clinics, which is very logical. You have a patient with a broken wrist, they should come over here and see the PA for bone health after the fact. And there's more and more that are in those settings that are getting primary referrals. Here's a DEXA scan, I don't know how to read it, or I don't know what this means, or what is their fracture risk assessment value? Do I need to have them on therapy? And it's neat to be able to help mentor those people in the different settings as well. Also, just being the expert on something, I have become a speaker for a few pharmaceutical companies, which has been really a neat way to give back. Yes, I may be talking about a drug, but as soon as that program is done and that laptop is closed and the pharmaceutical rep is out the door, I can speak one-on-one about how to make your bone health clinic better and how to really monopolize and do better by your patients, to get the best outcome for these patients, because there's more women every year having osteoporotic fractures than there are new cases of breast cancer, new strokes, and new heart attacks combined. Can you imagine having a heart attack and not leaving that hospital with a cardiology appointment set up for next week and 4 different drugs on board or whatever is necessary? Nothing happens in most osteoporotic fracture patients. So I have a patient right now in the hospital with a broken hip. She had a DEXA scan 5 years ago that was, reminder what DEXA scans are. So they're based on standard deviation from a age-matched individual, gender-matched individual. So I like to explain it by going underground. So I'm above ground now. I'm a positive number. I'm normal bone density. If we go underground from 1 foot under to 2.4 feet under, -2.4, that would be osteopenia, or what the correct term is, low bone mass now. But if we're 2.5 feet down or lower, that's osteoporosis. And just based on statistics and the many, many decades of data we have, anybody that's -2.5 or lower should really be on therapy. Any place in their evaluation. So if their spine was normal and their hip is osteoporotic, they're osteoporotic everywhere, because the way that osteophytes form in our spine, as well as aortic calcifications, can make that DEXA scan look better in the spine. Your osteoporosis anywhere, your osteoporosis everywhere. But -2.5. So this lady in the hospital with a hip fracture right now has had a -4.2 DEXA scan 5 years ago. And my partner is going to see her this afternoon, but I could find no information about ever being on treatment. Why do a test if you're not going to treat the patient appropriately, or at least refer them? I've been in existence for 10 years. It's not that hard. I mean, everybody in our area knows about us, and endocrinologists are referring to us, rheumatologists are referring to us, because they know that we know ins and outs of everything. I do televisits across the country for providers that are for patients that have somehow come across us to get them on the right therapy. I lose my words when I think about the amount of patients that are untreated with osteoporosis walking around. It's really...
That is amazing to me. And we're recording this in February, which is Heart Health Month. So there's all of these things about women and health and hearts, and heart attacks don't present the same. And that is such a staggering statistic at the sheer volume of people who are having the outcome, the preventable outcome, the fracture that we don't want to occur at all. And I just think about, when I think about hip fractures, I think about how morbid they are afterwards. People don't tend to die from them, but they never get back to their functioning, their ability, their independence that they had before. So if we can get people appropriately treated before they have that fracture, then we can prevent all of this inability to perform their activities of daily living or live independently, all of these things that our patients really value and want to be able to do. That's so important.
And then not even to consider it the social side of it. So I had a patient recently that said, Jacqui, I don't care about breaking another bone. I can handle the pain. I can't handle the stress it puts on my family because now they're visiting me in the nursing home or in the hospital and then the skilled nursing facility. And then I have to go to an assisted living because I can't take care of myself in my home. 25 to 30% of patients will die within a year after a hip fracture. And that same statistic holds true for vertebral compression fractures out 4 years. So 25% of patients out within 4 years will die from a vertebral compression fracture. The amount of patients that don't go back to living independently, about 40% of patients. About 40% of patients won't ever walk unassisted again without a walker or a cane or a wheelchair. It's incredible. And I just think about all these nursing homes that just have these patients that never leave, that aren't getting any kind of treatment, or maybe they're put on an oral bisphosphonate, which they're given with all of their other vitamins and pills, so they're never going to be taken properly. We have such great options. It's just a matter of knowing how to get to them.
We interrupt this broadcast with a very important announcement. You are not making enough money. Your practice and your physician do not understand the value you are adding to their patients, and therefore, you aren't earning what you're worth. If in the past your requests for a raise have been met with one single word, no. If you're working more hours than ever and seeing more patients, but you're not making any more money and you're feeling pissed about it. If you feel like you've hit the ceiling of your income band, this guide is for you. I've compiled the 5 most costly and most common mistakes that PAs make when asking for a raise, and I've told you how to avoid them and what to do instead. Download your free guide at tracybingaman.com/mistakes. Yeah, and getting the people that need those resources to a provider who understands what they need and how to take really good care of them. It's a big problem. And I think the interesting thing about healthcare in the United States is we spend more money than anywhere else. We have more providers, more resources per person, and still we have these pockets where these patients are undertreated or untreated, or they're seeing a provider that doesn't even know bone health is a specialty. And they're doing the best they can. I don't think any of those providers are intentionally saying, I don't care about osteoporosis, I'm not going to treat these people appropriately. I think they're doing the best they can with the information they have. They just don't have the latest, greatest technology. They're not an expert in all of these different therapies.
Yeah. It's scary. Yeah. One thing I'd recommend is the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation, BHOF, is a great resource for any provider. I'm on their ambassadors leader council, but there's lots and lots of education there for free, and we're working on making a kind of a touch point for providers or caregivers or patients to sort of know where to go to get more information. And then within my own little group, I'm going to make a like an Excel sheet that basically just a sheet that shares other providers in other states. So I have access to providers all over the place. I know how to get patients treatment. Well, I have a patient that was going to Arizona for 2 weeks and then California for 3 weeks and then Texas for 2 months. And I found a way to get her blood work at one place and then get her treatment in another place without having to establish with a new provider, because I knew she would be coming home to me eventually. But trying to just knowing where to go for those snowbirds or just travelers, is these patients are independent and active and they want to travel and I want them to travel. And I never tell patients they shouldn't travel because of their osteoporosis or shouldn't do anything. I do recommend not skydiving. I recommend no trampolines, but pretty much everything else. I want them to enjoy their lives. And if they're on therapy, treatment for osteoporosis reduces their fracture risk by an average of 70%, which is a big number when we're talking about life.
Very important. Yeah. Yeah, especially combine that with the morbidity and mortality following a major fracture. It just seems like such a no-brainer to get patients to you, to get them on appropriate therapy. Okay, so one more thing before we wrap up. Is this passion of yours from the bone health, or were you this on fire for patient care when you were in primary care? Do you think that this was like you got into the right space for you, or were you always like this?
I love everything I do. Like my life is just I mean I did a 5-year PA program. So I was a PA at 23 years old with my master's, and I've always thrown myself into everything I do. I just I feel like I found my calling with bone health. I just eat, breathe, dream, love. I I just love it, and my husband laughs about it. And my boys are 6 and 8, and they'll say, "Well, what does mommy do?" "Oh, she's a bone PA." "What does she do?" "She treats all the bones all over the country." And I'll travel. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I was in Indy, and my son, "Mom, why do you have to go? Can't there be another PA that talks about bones out there?" And we always have a good conversation. I think it's important for them to understand how much I educate other people to do better and to treat this disease better, and to even there's a condition called hypophosphatasia. And if you think back to PA school and think about an alkaline phosphatase level, if it was high, you'd say, okay, the patient has Paget's or they just had a fracture. But if it's low, well, just ignore it. We now have this a disease that causes a gene mutation of alk phos, and by treating it, you can improve everything about a patient's life. It's not just bones, and treating patients properly, just acknowledging that this disease exists and that there is a treatment, and that there's probably 1 in every 60,000 patients that have this condition, and we were taught to ignore alk phos. I mean, remember that things change and evolve in medicine, and this is not a perfect science, and that we have so much more we can do by just being aware and listening to what else is out there and not being so caught up in our little hole of just putting patients on Fosamax, and knowing that there's other options, safer, less long-term side effect options out there. I'm involved significantly with PSPA, Pennsylvania Society of PAs, and AAPA. And this year, I've been on the House of Delegates for, I think it's going on 18 years now, at AAPA. I'm almost always in the back doing something or up on the dais doing something. But I'm the sergeant at arms again this year. So I sort of keep everything going there. And I'm happy to say there's no bone health at all in AAPA, really. So there are other things that I like besides bones, but it's just so important to advocate for our profession. You know, we have this title change, physician associate. We have to help every state get laws passed so that this can be our way across the board. We have to be aware of optimal team practice. And there's no way to do that without supporting your local, your state, and your national organizations. So that's my tiny little plug for your state and AEPA. But really important, we can't ever do better without the support of these big organizations helping us.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about a platform like this and speaking at a conference or going and educating other people is that, you and I and our ability to see patients on any given day are limited by our physical capacity to see X number of patients and safely care for them and get notes done and be able to get home to our families. But when you take time to record an episode like this, when you travel to speak to a large group of people, you're amplifying that ability. So those providers walk away better knowing how to take care of those patients. And it's like a little piece of you, and your knowledge and experience goes with everyone who leaves that room. It's just so important. And I love, this persistent passion of yours that's been going on for almost 2 decades of this is worthwhile and this is worthy of your time. And this is important for patients and our profession and the future of healthcare. It's so refreshing. I think a lot of people are like, oh, healthcare is what it is. And, it's not amazing. And there's a lot of problems. And I think that's certainly true. But there's sort of complaining about it. And then there's what can we do about it? What action can we take? What small steps or shifts in our own daily activities and our interactions with patients and contributing to our state or national organizations? Those things matter. I think that is so, so important. Awesome. Well, Jacqi, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. This has been a pleasure. I love these interviews because I'm always sitting here just smiling and feeling inspired to go take better care of my patients. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't know about you, but conversations like this with PAs like Jacqi make me feel like I need to be doing more and like I want to advocate for patients and to uncover these hidden areas of medicine where patients aren't being served and where we need more people referring to specialists in bone health and more people advocating for full independent practice and optimal team practice in whatever state you're in. Thank you for joining us on another episode of The PA is In. I will see you next time. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.